Welcome to the all-new Hoop Nova, your ultimate source for everything basketball.
The Philadelphia 76ers finally land LeBron James on a minimum contract, and somehow, not every Sixers fan is celebrating. You would think adding one of the greatest basketball players of all time for a relatively small salary would be an automatic win. But in Philadelphia, some fans are already worried that bringing LeBron into town could completely change the identity of the franchise. One Philadelphia radio reaction basically summed up the frustration. This fan didn't see LeBron as the final piece of a championship puzzle. Instead, they saw the beginning of what they called LeBron Central. The concern is pretty simple. Philadelphia has young players they want to see develop. They want Tyrese Maxey to continue growing into a star. They want Edgecombe to have an opportunity to establish himself. And they want the team to build something that belongs to Philadelphia rather than becoming another roster constructed around LeBron James. That is where the criticism starts. Some fans worry that once LeBron arrives, every major decision will eventually become connected to him. Who gets traded? Who gets playing time? Which veterans are brought in? Which players fit next to LeBron? Suddenly, instead of talking about the Sixers' young core, the conversation becomes about LeBron. And there is another name making this situation even more interesting: Rich Paul. Rich Paul is LeBron's longtime friend and agent, and his influence on NBA player movement is well known. That is why some Sixers fans became uncomfortable when discussions involving Joel Embiid started appearing around people connected to LeBron's circle. For example, Max Kellerman has publicly discussed the possibility of Philadelphia eventually moving on from Embiid, particularly because of concerns surrounding his health and how difficult it could be to build the roster around him. Rich Paul has pushed back on that idea, but the conversation itself is enough to make Sixers fans nervous. Imagine being Joel Embiid. You've spent years as the face of the franchise. You've carried enormous expectations in Philadelphia. And then, almost immediately after LeBron arrives, people connected to the broader basketball conversation are discussing whether you should be traded, even if there is absolutely no plan to move Embiid. It creates an uncomfortable headline, and that's really the larger issue with LeBron. Wherever he goes, the spotlight follows. LeBron doesn't necessarily have to personally create controversy. His presence alone changes the scale of every conversation. A normal roster decision suddenly becomes a LeBron story. A trade rumor becomes a LeBron story. A teammate's role becomes a LeBron story. That's the LeBron effect. We've seen versions of it before. There have been situations where Rich Paul or other people around LeBron have been connected to conversations about Lakers players and potential roster moves. Whether those situations actually influence decisions is another question, but the perception is enough to create tension. And now Philadelphia is wondering whether the same dynamic could eventually happen with the Sixers. Then there is Edgecombe. He's young, talented, and represents exactly the kind of player Philadelphia fans should be excited about. But if the team is trying to win immediately with LeBron, there is always a possibility that young players become less important in the short term. That's the fear. Why spend years developing a young player if the priority suddenly becomes surrounding LeBron with experienced veterans who can contribute immediately? Of course, there is another side to this. If you're a Sixers fan and you have an opportunity to add LeBron James for a minimum contract, how do you say no? That's the part critics of the criticism keep pointing out. You are getting an all-time great without committing a massive portion of your salary cap to him. Even at this stage of his career, LeBron can still provide scoring, playmaking, leadership, and postseason experience. Philadelphia has been searching for championship-level success for years. So if LeBron gives them even one realistic shot at winning a title, many fans will happily accept every bit of drama that comes with him. That's the gamble. Basketball upside is enormous. The personality and media circus could be enormous too. And then there are reports and speculation about where LeBron could spend his time during the season. The possibility of him maintaining a strong connection to New York has already fueled jokes and criticism from Philadelphia fans. For a city that takes enormous pride in itself, that can feel like an insult. Philadelphia and New York have always had a complicated relationship. Philly fans don't exactly need another reason to argue that their city can compete with New York. So imagine the reaction if LeBron plays for Philadelphia. but spend significant time elsewhere. Some fans would shrug and say, "Who cares? Just win." Others would see it as another example of the franchise revolving around LeBron's preferences. And that's why the debate is so fascinating, because this isn't really about whether LeBron is good enough. Nobody needs to debate that. The real question is whether Philadelphia is willing to accept everything that comes with having LeBron James. We've seen this movie before. LeBron's first major free agency spectacle came in 2010 with the decision when his move from Cleveland to Miami became one of the biggest stories in sports history. The criticism was massive, especially in Cleveland, but then came the results. LeBron reached 8 consecutive NBA Finals between 2011 and 2018, winning championships in Miami and Cleveland during that run. That's the argument his supporters will always make. Yes, there is drama. Yes, there are rumors. Yes, the media attention can become overwhelming. But when LeBron is on your team, the potential reward is enormous. Philadelphia has to decide whether that reward is worth the risk. Maybe LeBron arrives, embraces the young players, helps Maxey take another step, mentors Edgecombe, and gives the Sixers the veteran leadership they've been missing. Or maybe the franchise slowly becomes consumed by the LeBron ecosystem, with every roster decision, trade rumor, and locker room storyline being connected back to him. Nobody knows yet. And that's what makes this situation so interesting. Sixers fans wanted a team built for the future. Now they may have a chance to build around one of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. For some fans, that's a dream come true. For others, it's the beginning of a nightmare. But there's one thing nobody can deny: if LeBron James really is coming to Philadelphia, the Sixers are no longer going to be just another NBA team. Every move will be watched. Every loss will be analyzed. Every trade rumor will become breaking news. And every championship conversation will start with one question: can LeBron James actually bring Philadelphia the title it's been waiting for? For years, the argument with LeBron was simple: the circus was worth it because the results were worth it. 8 straight finals appearances proved that point. But is that still true in 2026? That is the big question Philadelphia has to answer, because bringing LeBron James into the Sixers lineup doesn't just add another superstar. It changes how the entire team has to function. According to reports, LeBron is expected to handle point guard responsibilities. That could actually benefit Tyrese Maxey, because it allows Maxey to spend more time attacking away from the ball, where he can be extremely dangerous. But there is a catch. When you add another high-usage superstar, somebody has to sacrifice. And that's where things get complicated. Philadelphia already has players who are accustomed to having the ball in their hands. Now you're asking them to adjust their games around LeBron. We've seen this movie before. Players such as Chris Bosh and Kevin Love had to dramatically change their roles after joining LeBron. They went from being major offensive options on their previous teams to becoming supporting pieces. Even Kevin Love, who was never known as a selfish player, later discussed how difficult that adjustment could be. That's the part fans sometimes overlook. Players can say they're willing to sacrifice their ego all they want, but when you're used to being the guy, becoming the third or fourth option isn't always easy. And if Philadelphia is already expecting major sacrifices from its core, the margin for error becomes very small. Then comes the biggest concern of all: health. Over the past several seasons, LeBron has still missed significant time, while Joel Embiid has dealt with even more serious availability concerns. If both players are unavailable for stretches, Philadelphia could end up spending much of the season trying to build chemistry without its two biggest stars. And that's a major problem. You can't completely reinvent a team's offensive system and expect everything to click instantly in the playoffs. Especially not in the Eastern Conference. The East is no longer the easy path people might remember from LeBron's earlier career. You've got Giannis Antetokounmpo, strong competition in Miami, a dangerous Indiana team if Tyrese Halliburton returns healthy, Cleveland, Detroit, and the defending champion Knicks. There are legitimate contenders everywhere. So if LeBron came to Philadelphia expecting an easier road to the finals, that assumption could be badly outdated. And then there's Nick Nurse. If things go badly, he's one of the first people whose job could come under pressure. LeBron has historically played for coaches who faced enormous expectations. Frank Vogel was dismissed after winning a championship, while Darvin Ham was let go after reaching the Western Conference Finals. And the most famous example might be David Blatt in Cleveland. Blatt took the Cavaliers to the NBA Finals and had Cleveland near the top of the standings before eventually being fired. The lesson isn't necessarily that LeBron personally controls every coaching decision. It's that when LeBron is involved, patience becomes extremely valuable and extremely rare. Nick Nurse was hired before LeBron ever entered the picture. Now, if the Sixers struggle, he'll have to prove he can manage a team with completely different expectations. So, that Philadelphia radio host may have a point about one thing. The concern isn't that LeBron is a bad player. It's that adding LeBron changes everything. The rotations change, the hierarchy changes, the expectations change, and suddenly, every loss becomes a LeBron story. For Philadelphia, the gamble is obvious: accept the chaos and chase a championship, or protect the long-term identity of the franchise. Because with LeBron James, you rarely get to choose just one. A few months from now, Sixers fans might look back at that Philadelphia radio rant and say, maybe that guy wasn't wrong. Maybe he was just early. Because when you really break down his argument, it's not necessarily about LeBron James being a bad player. It's about what LeBron's arrival could mean for the identity of the franchise. For longtime Sixers fans, this team has been through a lot. They've lived through the process, watched Joel Embiid become the face of the organization, and waited years for Philadelphia to finally put together a legitimate championship contender. Now, suddenly, the entire story could become about one thing: getting LeBron another championship. And that changes everything. The concern is that almost everyone becomes expendable except LeBron. We've already seen speculation involving Joel Embiid, including hypothetical trade discussions. Then there's VJ Edgecombe, a young player who could potentially become a major star in his own right. So imagine a scenario where Philadelphia decides to move on from Embiid and even considers trading Edgecombe, simply to build the strongest possible roster around LeBron, Tyrese Maxey, and Jaylen Brown. That's the fear. Not that LeBron isn't great. Not that he can't help Philadelphia win, but that the entire organization could become centered around his championship window. And if things don't work in the first season, the pressure could become even greater. That's why the criticism from Philadelphia fans is understandable. They've spent years investing emotionally in this franchise. Embiid represents a huge part of that history. The young players represent the future. LeBron represents something different: immediate championship pressure. And Lakers fans understand that better than almost anyone. When LeBron eventually left Los Angeles, plenty of fans were ready for a new direction. The constant attention, rumors, roster changes, and championship expectations had become exhausting. For some of them, Philadelphia may now be signing up for that same experience. The difference is that Sixers fans have to decide whether the potential championship is worth everything that comes with it. Because with LeBron, you don't just acquire a superstar, you acquire an entire ecosystem. There is an interesting difference between how LeBron is viewed in Los Angeles and how he could potentially be viewed in Philadelphia. In most NBA cities, if a superstar comes in, wins a championship, and changes the direction of the franchise, fans will probably love that player forever. Look at someone like Giannis Antetokounmpo in Milwaukee. He delivered the championship the city had been waiting for, and his legacy there is practically untouchable. But Los Angeles is different. The Lakers have such a massive championship history that the standard is almost impossible to satisfy. They have won more championships than nearly every other franchise and have appeared in the finals an enormous number of times throughout NBA history. That creates a completely different level of expectation for many franchises. One championship can define an entire generation. For the Lakers, one championship can almost feel like the minimum requirement. That's why the relationship between LeBron and Lakers fans became complicated. When LeBron arrived in Los Angeles, he immediately gave the franchise relevance again. The Lakers had just gone through a stretch where they missed the playoffs for several consecutive seasons, something the organization wasn't accustomed to. Then LeBron arrived, eventually helped deliver a championship, and restored the Lakers to the top of the NBA. You would think that would make him untouchable, but the Lakers' expectations are different. Once the championship was won, the focus immediately shifted toward winning another one, and that's where some of the frustration began. The Russell Westbrook trade became one of the biggest examples. The move dramatically changed the Lakers roster, and when things didn't work, pressure mounted for additional changes. LeBron was very publicly involved in discussions surrounding the Lakers' roster direction. At one point, he even appeared to endorse the idea of aggressively sacrificing future draft assets to improve the team. Immediately, that kind of messaging creates an interesting dynamic, because when a superstar has enormous influence, fans start asking a simple question: who is actually running the organization? Is it the front office? Is it the coaching staff? Or is the superstar effectively helping determine the direction of the franchise? LeBron's public comments about the Lakers and their front office became part of that conversation. There was also the infamous them picks reference involving Los Angeles Rams general manager Les Snead. LeBron praised Snead's aggressive philosophy, which many interpreted as another message toward the Lakers' decision-makers. Then came comments involving Sam Presti and the possibility of LeBron potentially returning to Cleveland someday. Even if LeBron's comments were simply compliments or hypothetical discussion, the timing created plenty of speculation, and that's the problem. With being LeBron James, everything gets magnified. A normal compliment becomes a headline, a joke becomes a controversy, a trade comment becomes a potential ultimatum. A casual statement about another team becomes evidence that something is happening behind the scenes. That's the ecosystem that Philadelphia is potentially walking into, and that may be exactly what the Philadelphia radio host was worried about. His complaint wasn't necessarily that LeBron can't play. It was that once LeBron becomes the centerpiece, everything around him can start feeling like it exists for one purpose: winning LeBron another championship. That's a completely different experience from building around a young core, and the Lakers' experience is the warning sign. Eventually, some Lakers fans became exhausted with the constant drama surrounding roster moves, media stories, trade rumors, and public comments. One championship wasn't enough to eliminate those frustrations, because the standard in Los Angeles is always higher. Now Philadelphia gets to find out whether it can handle the same environment. The good news for the Sixers is that this situation doesn't necessarily have to last forever. If the reported arrangement is limited to 2 seasons, Philadelphia has a relatively short window to find out whether the experiment works. And on paper, the roster could be terrifying. LeBron James, Tyrese Maxey, Jaylen Brown, Joel Embiid, and a collection of talented players around them. That starting lineup looks incredible on a graphic. But basketball isn't played on a graphic. Chemistry matters, roles matter, egos matter, health matters, and sacrifice matters. Just look at Jaylen Brown's previous situation in Boston. Brown played alongside Jason Tatum, a player who generally isn't viewed as a loud or confrontational superstar. They won championships and consistently competed at the highest level. Yet there were still moments when questions about their roles and relationship became part of the conversation. If even a successful duo like that can experience tension, imagine putting several established stars together and asking all of them to sacrifice. That's why Philadelphia's new roster is both exciting and terrifying. The ceiling might be championship level, but the floor could be complete chaos. And that's ultimately what makes this LeBron experiment so fascinating. If everything works, nobody will care about the drama. Philadelphia will celebrate the championship, LeBron's legacy will grow, and the Sixers will have justified every controversial decision they made. But if things start going wrong, every trade rumor, every lineup decision, every injury, and every public comment will be examined under a microscope. And suddenly, that Philadelphia radio host who sounded crazy on day one might start sounding pretty reasonable. Because with LeBron James, winning can make all the chaos disappear. But when the winning stops, the chaos becomes the story.